Hi everyone, welcome back to Blockchain Basics series. In the last part of this series, we talked about cryptocurrencies, proof of work, properties of money, and a lot of things like that. In this particular session, we are going to talk about how does Bitcoin mining work, what are the problems that the miners need to solve to get rewarded, how does blockchain rewards work. We are also going to talk about Bitcoin halving and a lot of things around this space. So let's get started. Okay, so definition about what is Bitcoin mining. Bitcoin mining is the process by which Bitcoin transactions are validated digitally on the Bitcoin network and added to the blockchain ledger. It is done by solving complex cryptographic puzzles to verify blocks of the transactions that are updated on the decentralized blockchain ledger. So that's the definition. We already talked some part about it as proof of work consensus mechanism, but we're going to talk in detail right now. So if you can see this graph here, this shows that there are multiple miners. Miners are basically computers that are processing all the transactions across the world. So they are connected over a peer-to-peer network. So they have a copy of a blockchain in the present state, and all of them are trying to add a new block to this blockchain. And the way they prove that this is the correct block having all the correct transactions is by proof of work algorithm. According to that, they have to find a solution to a cryptographic hash problem, and when they do, their block gets added to the blockchain, and the chain with the longest set of valid blocks is going to be broadcasted to all the miners across the world, and they are going to have it a copy on their chain on their machine, and they are also going to validate it, and the machine or the miner who added the new block get rewarded with block reward. So it's basically you do some processing work, and if you are the first one to finish it, then you get some block rewards. Now why does this mining is required? So if you think from the perspective of Bitcoin as a currency, then there are a lot of data that needs to be stored. For example, the transactional data. Our banks store this transactional data and they take fees from us. In a similar format, if there are couple of miners who are going to store our data, the state of the blockchain, which have all our transactions, then they need to get rewarded in some format. Else why do they spend their computation power to do it? So these miners get rewarded with the block reward as well as a small transactional fees that you have to pay, known as gas fees. Now we're going to talk in detail about what is the mathematical problem that these machines are trying to solve. But before going into the mathematical problem specifically, we should understand one thing, that is what is SHA 256. So SHA 256 is basically a hashing algorithm that is designed in a way to create basically one way hash of some data. So if you have some data, it's going to generate a fingerprint out of it by doing some mathematical operations, and that fingerprint, essentially this flow is one way. So you can, if you have the correct set of the data, then you will always end up to the same hash, but there is no way you can get the hash and get the data from it. So you cannot get data from the hash, but you will always get the same hash from the same data. So that's how it works. And if your data changes a bit, like even you change some very small part of it, it's going to be a totally new hash. So that is what SHA 256 algorithm does. From this picture you can understand this thing. So why are we talking about this hashing thing? Because the problem these machines are trying to solve is a hash problem. So let's have a live demo to take a deeper look into what kind of problem they are trying to solve. Okay, if you see on the screen, I have a single block here. Now you can see there are a couple of properties like the block number, nounce. We're going to talk about it in this video. There is also a property called data, and there is a hash. So if you see here, I am going to update this data with my name, something like my name is. So as I'm typing, you can see the hash is changing here, right? So for every single change on this data, there is a new hash generated. So this hash includes all the properties like nouns, data, and everything. So if you see, if I change the nouns some way, then this hash is also changing. So the problem which these machines are trying to solve is that after every 2 weeks there is a new target hash that is being generated. 2 weeks means 2016 blocks being added onto the Bitcoin chain, because each block takes 10 minutes. We talked about it in the last video. So the hash target is some value of this some value for this hash. So you have to make sure that your hash which you have generated is less than or equal to that hash target. So it's usually into something like a very small value which starts from 000. There are like 15, 16, 17, 18 or 19 zeros, and your hash has to be some way below it or maybe equal to it. And how do you do that? How do you make sure that your hash matches to that? For example, in this demo, the hash target is essentially like requires 40 in the startings. So that's how it's looking right now. That how do a miner make sure that their hash is something below the hash target? Because they cannot change the data. If they change the transactional data, then it is for sure a invalid block. So how do they make sure it? So they use this nounce property. So for every nounce, you can see I'm able to generate a new hash. They are trying to get the value of the nounce for which the hash has the value less than or equal to the target hash. So if you click on mine, you can see once it is mined, the nounce value have been changed. So if I am going to change it again, you can see that the hash has changed. But when I enter it again, it becomes valid. So that's the answer for this mathematical problem, that what is the value of nounce such that the hash generated from the block nounce and data is less than x value, like, and the x value is generated after every 2 weeks. So that's why we have nounce property in all the blocks. Now you understand what problem does these machines are trying to solve, what is nounce and the importance of it. It's not just any random number, but it's the proof of the computation. Also, one of the important thing which you have to understand here is that this value nounce is unknown to you to get a specific type of hash, then it is a complex problem and that takes time to solve. But if you, let's say, have the value of nounce, block and data, then you can generate this hash very easily. So that does not require much of the computation. So the block which have find out the value of nounce for which the hash is less than the target hash is going to broadcast this value and also of course add it to the chain, and all the miners in the Bitcoin network are going to use the value of nounce, data, block number and all the X things which we discussed to check if they are able to get the same hash as it is mentioned in the block. So that's how they also validate it, and this validation does not need a very good amount of time and computation. So that's why they are not being rewarded for validating. Perfect. We have already discussed about how does mining works and what is the exact problem that these miners are trying to solve. So now let's talk about very important thing that is called Bitcoin halving. When Satoshi Nakamoto created Bitcoin, he knew that for a currency to survive the inflation, either the demand has to arise or the supply has to reduce. So how does the price of a currency is determined, or price of anything is determined in general, is from two parameters. One is supply and the other thing is demand. So if something have a very low supply and a lot demand, then the price of that thing will go up. Whereas if something have a lot of supply but less demand, then the price of it will get down. So in case of Bitcoin, Satoshi Nakamoto knew that to make sure that Bitcoin price will rise in future, he have to cut off the supply. So after every 4 years, the block reward for Bitcoin network gets reduced by 50%. For example, in 2009, the block reward for adding a new block to the blockchain was 50 Bitcoins. In 2012, to 25. In 2016, it was 12.5. In 2020 and till today, it is 6.25. Next, it's going to change in 2024. So that's what we call Bitcoin halving. And that is one of the very crucial thing that makes sure that the price of Bitcoin goes up and up after every 4 years. So there will be 32 halvings that are going to occur in total, and out of which we have already seen 4. So the last halving will be done in year 2140, and in that year all the miners will stop receiving any block rewards, and the only rewards they will get is the gas fees you pay. So gas fees is basically the transactional fees that you have to pay to make a transaction. So that's it for this session. In the next session, we are going to talk about what kind of data is stored on chain, what is transactions actually, and how they look like on chain. We're going to see a blockchain explorer and a lot of couple interesting things we're going to do in the next session. So, all right, see you there.